So let me introduce the chair and co-chair of the sessions. So good morning, invitees and delegates. Welcome to this session 15. Session 11. So now we have Dr. Girish Chandra Joshi as the chair of the session. Girish Chandra Joshi is a senior consultant in Uttarakhand State Disaster Management Authority. His interests are disaster management, soil dynamics, microzonation, risk assessment. He has more than 15 years of professional experience in disaster management and earthquake engineering. He coordinated many projects related to disaster management and earthquake engineering, funded by multilateral agencies like World Bank, UNDP, Government of India, and several state governments. Developed various educational and training materials and training modules. Many old buildings have been also retrofitted under his guidance in Uttarakhand. Some of the best studies like disaster risk assessment, river morphology, and modeling and development of decision support system in the state were conducted under his supervision. Many scientific and technical papers and reports authored by him have published in reputed journals and conferences. Presently, he is working as a senior consultant in USDMA, Government of Uttarakhand. He is facilitating knowledge networking with various specialized agencies and will evaluate, add value, and to facilitate implementation of various components of USDMA. I welcome Dr. Joshi for this session. We have Dr. Rajib Biswas as the co-chair of the session. Dr. Rajib Biswas is working as faculty in Department of Physics, Tejpur University since 2010. Before that, he worked in Geoscience Division of NIEST, Jorhat, India. Pursued his PhD in geophysical instrumentation. His expertise is in micro tremor measurement in assessment of site effects. Accordingly, he investigated site effects in order to retrieve subsurface of a city via ambient noise recording during one of major research grants awarded to him. He has been actively engaged in ground motion studies, engineering seismology, as well as soil amplification. I welcome Dr. Rajib Biswas for this session as co-chair. Now I'll hand over the stage to chair and co-chair. And I think you have, no, Dr. Professor Ambalgan's resume you have, no? You can proceed, sir. Thank you. Sir, we can't hear you, Girish ji. Joshi ji, we can't hear you. Little louder, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Raghuveer, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to chair this wonderful session regarding this microzonation, and some of the hazard studies I have seen in this session will be delivered by some of the reputed scientists and other speakers. First of all, it's my privilege to introduce Professor N. Bazagan from IISc Bangalore. Professor N. Bazagan and myself having contemporary, because we have started our career in the same time. I think I have done my MTech in 2003 and Professor N. Bazagan has 2004. From after that he has done some wonderful work. When I was doing my PhD work, and I think in the same time some papers I have also refers at the time from Professor N. Bazagan. So it's my privilege to introduce Professor N. Bazagan for this session. Professor N. Bazagan Panjamani is an associate professor in the Department of Civil Engineering, Indian Institute of Science, Bangalore, India. His major research area are engineering seismology, earthquake geotechnical engineering, and applied geophysics for geotechnical engineering problems. His works on seismic microzonation on Indian cities is a significant contribution towards improving seismic zoning map of the India, and he received the prestigious Endeavour Fellowship Award from the Australian government in 2009 and worked on railway ballast in the University of Wollongong in New South Wales, Australia. He received the IE Young Engineers Award in 2010 and 11 from the Institution of Engineers, and the ISES Award of Merit in 2015 award for the outstanding work in earthquake science, Young Scientist category, Indian Society of Earthquake Science. He has received the Indian Geotechnical Society Reviewer of the year 2016 award for the outstanding contribution to the Indian Geotechnical Journal. Now he is serving as a research advisor for Nanyang Academy of Science, Singapore. He is a visiting professor in King Saud University, Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. He has published about more than 90, I think, journal papers, 100 conference papers, 1 book and 3 chapters. As of now, Professor Anbadagan received about 723 lakh Indian rupees funding so far, and he is an active consultant in his area of research. He is also serving as an expert member of the Committee for Arriving Nuclear Power Plant Design Parameters, Department of Atomic Energy, and he is also involved in a national mission of dam rehabilitation and improvement project TRIP. So I think he has a very lots of experience, and I hope that this inaugural keynote lecture will be give us some insight about how we are basically looking for this kind of the problem. And so now I over to the Professor Anbadagan. Sir, you have 20 minutes of your presentation and 3 to 5 minutes for question hour session. So if anybody having any question answer, so they can go for the question hour tab and they can post their question answer there. And my co-chair, I have requested to my co-chairs, Dr. Rajiv, so he will be take up this question and answer session. Thank you very much.
Chairman and co-chairman and also the organizing committee. So I'm going to talk about the region specific consideration for the ground motion prediction equation development and representative parameters for seismic hazard and design spectrum. So as I all know that, so among the natural hazard, the earthquake actually created more than 60 to 70% death and economic loss. So this is why most of the geotechnical engineers, because of the hazard created by the earthquake, mainly depends upon the soil. There are several researches going on. So this entire conference we are trying to focus. So, but even though there was a well-developed methodology and procedures and systematic the publication and all those things, but most of the time we end up in doing the procedures or methodology or the model developed elsewhere without knowing its applicability in the regional scale. So where it lead to a lot of error and estimation and the subsequent the prediction associated results. So in order to focus that, actually, we do something called region specific consideration. So in order to incorporate the regional level input in the hazard estimation and design spectrum. So I'm going to talk about the research we are carried out for the Himalayan region so far as. So why we need to do the region specific hazard, one has to understand. So they have to go back to the engineering seismology concept of earthquake, where the elastic rebound theory says that, okay, so due to the rotation of the earth and the attraction of the planets, there is a storage of the stress in the crust rock. So this crust rock basically, keep on storing the energy. When the stored energy exceed the capacity of the rock, it breaks and releases as a seismic energy. So that release frequently happens in the joints of the plate and rarely happens in the middle of the plates. So saying that as a elastic rebound theory, so one has to understand why we need to have the regional level understanding of that. So if you look at that, our planet formation, like Earth formation in the several million years ago, for example, 170 million years ago, if you look at that, most of the planets are together. Basically, if you look at the image on this, you can see that most of the planets are together. So with the subsequent several million years of movement, the rotation and then the natural release of the energy due to the earthquake, these planets are separated, which has been well explained by the continental drift and theories. So if you look at that, basically, so the India, once it was a continent about 60 million years ago. So this continent started moving, okay, so towards a European continent. You can see the right side. So where you can see that it has hit a Eurasian plate. And because of this movement and the continental plate activity, so we have actually a diverse seismotectonic, seismicity, geology, rock type, soil type, even a soil thickness. But in spite of that, we use similar hazard assessment procedure and protocol, and then the same GMPs and the classification system impact our design spectrum. So by looking at this, basically, so if you look at the continental formation of the Indian plate, it's very clear that the India actually has an island once at hit in the Eurasian plate and formed the joints between these plates. So because of that, there is a continental drift. So where you can see that the continental drift related plate boundary seismic activity in this region, and there is a joints between the two sides like eastern and western side where you have the transformed plate boundary activity in this. So apart from that, the bottom like southern part of the southern India where you have the middle of the plate, so it undergoes a bending because of the continuous movement and then pushing up the different phase. So which create a lot of the geological formation and the natural activities which end up in forming a thick sediment, okay, to the thickness of more than several kilometers to the thin level where a crust rock itself appear in the ground surface at several places of the southern India. So by considering this heterogeneity in the complex system, so we will be understanding that the seismic activity is not uniform throughout the country. So let's see, I am going to focus my study on the particularly northern India. Let's see what is the state of current scientific understanding about the seismotectonics in North India. So if you look at the seismotectonic, the recent studies, okay, so from after 1950, so we should understand that even though the India is a very old continent and a lot of old age language and other things are exist, but the understanding of earthquake scientifically started only 1950s. Afterwards only we have had at least some understanding of the seismic record and other things. So which given an opportunity that there are several huge earthquakes or big earthquakes are reported in the Himalayan region, but which has been understood after 1950. So this graph basically shows such a big earthquakes and also the plate boundary and the segment where it has been moving and what speed, and also the segment which is ruptured and not ruptured for the future. So this indicates that there are places in the Himalayan region, it has been identified by the expert of seismologists, the several places in the Himalayan regions are locked. There is a concept of called seismic gap. It's a potential for creating the future earthquake. So that is what the message we should understand from the seismology and other things, where it has been well explained in this figure by the Kusala Rajendran et al. On the recent studies. So with that information, let's see what we practice in the as a design parameter. So as a law know that the IS 1893 is the Indian seismic code, which we generally use for getting the seismic design of the any building or important structures. So there are two type of spectrums are given in the recent version of 2016. So this is the response spectrum based method. This is actually the equivalence based method. So both the spectrum, there is a design spectrum where it defines SA by G, which is linked with the zonation factor of this one. So but when we try to understand the modification of the seismic wave and the zonation due to the variation in the seismicity, so we also found that these spectrums are not related to Indian data. So then we started looking at that, why it is not related, so how we can relate it. So even though the modern countries using a spectrum like this, which is incorporate a regional data from the recorded earthquake, where we adopt a spectrum like this in the same era, where these spectrums are, nobody knows where it come and what was the reason. So by looking at this, we aimed our study to incorporate a regional level input in the hazard estimation and derive a design spectrum for the southern India and North India. I am going to discuss today the Himalayan region of the same. So if you look at any part of the hazard analysis, the ground motion prediction equations are very important. So as on now, so these are all the ground motion prediction equations are available in India, which is many of them are developed by Indian scientists, but you can look at the range of magnitude it's available, the distance it is available. So most of the equations are insufficient to potentially represent here the big possible earthquake in the Himalayan region and also the distance where it has to suffer. So not only this, in the initial stage of the engineering seismology, so these kind of ground motion prediction equation also used in India. This is actually used in the nuclear power plant design, where they do not have any kind of equations. So in order to understand this, we try to see that what type of equation which is applicable to the Himalayan region, all these equations, how we can give the wide range of magnitude and distance. So we attempted in that, we collected a seismic data, recorded different parts of Himalayan region. You can see the data collected and station details and recorded data and historical data. So using that, we try to arrive the regional seismotectonic parameters of stress bar, attenuation factor, kappa factor, and then the distance attenuation factor. So most of the GMPs what I quoted earlier, some of them are derived based on the data, many of them are derived based on the synthetic ground motion model, where they used this kind of seismotectonic parameters developed elsewhere and in Indian region. That means even though the equations are available, since it does not have the seismotectonic parameters derived from Indian data, applicability of those equations are questionable. Okay, so what we did, we have taken a large number of earthquake data, okay, about 520 ground motion, and try to estimate these parameters independently and arrive for the, this is the typical parameters. So after arriving this parameter, so then we try to see that different functional form of the ground motion. Okay, so there is a ground motion equation, in that a different functional form. Which type of ground motion functional form is applicable to Himalayan region using this data, and we end up in the functional form which is given is the best functional form to derive the Himalayan ground motion prediction equation. So this functional form further extended with the all available data and simulated synthetically large data in order to fill the gap and come up with our own ground motion prediction equation. (750 kilometer) and which is well comparable with some of the known earthquake spectrum. So the spectrum comparisons are very important, because when you compare a PGA, generally you can see the log scale people will use, you end up in the very little difference in the figure, but actually if we estimate it to be 5 times, 10 times, as you know that log scales are 10 times difference between the 1 to 2 in the scale. Okay, so in order to overcome that, we developed this equation which is already available in the soil dynamics earthquake engineering. We found that this equation also having the less error when compared to any other equation. So even though we develop this equation, it doesn't mean that the one equation can take care of uncertainty associated with the ground motion prediction equation. So in order to account the uncertainty, okay, generally people use a known GMPs developed in the region, or based on the 1 or 2 GMP they use, without following any systematic approach to select a best suitable equation. So the Dalawad suggested the suitable ground motion prediction at any region can be identified using the intensity data or the recorded ground motion data using log likelihood procedure, where you can arrive the weights as well as a rank using this data. So we also adopted same concept and consider all the available equation developed in India as well as the similar applicable equation from the Western countries, and try to estimate segmented based GMP selection. So the segmented, because Dalawad given a 0 to 300 as a equal weightage, as I said that the geologically, seismotectonically, our subsurface are very complex in the crust as well as to the surface. So the following the one equation to the entire seismic steady area is not appropriate. So in order to overcome that, we applied a segment based concept of GMP selection, where we segment a data into 100, 200, 300, depends upon that, and try to get a ranking and weight. So this gives the more representative way of the regional seismotectonic data availability and the parameters in the GMP selection. This is actually published in the Journal of Earthquake Engineering. So with that, so we could have the set of GMPs and the most reliable GMP for the hazard analysis. So even though the GMP helps to get a hazard values, but this GMP is actually not the spectral shape representing in the region, because the GMP depends upon the parameters what it's used for the developing that particular shape. So when we want to develop a design spectrum, we have to again go back for the recorded acceleration time history. So you can look at it. This is the Indian design spectrum currently used, which has a 0.4 second, 0.67, 0.66 as the cutoff period for this one. So when you want to study this, we need to understand what is the difference between the response spectrum, design spectrum, and normalized spectrum. So the response spectrum is actually the response of the single degree of the structure. If it is the recorded data, it implicates a regional level shape. So if it is estimated from the numerical model, it's basically depends upon the what kind of input given. If it is estimated from the GMPs, it only depends upon the what type of model parameters are used, which does not mean anything with the regional level design spectrum. So in order to overcome that, the Newmark and all, they come up with the concept of developing a design spectrum. So where that a recorded earthquake at each region will be taken, and the acceleration sensitive region, velocity sensitive region, displacement sensitive region has to be defined. From that, we can get a normalized spectrum, then design spectrum. So generally in India, what people will do, they take a response spectrum, divide by the PGA, they take that as a design spectrum. Actually, it is a normalized spectrum, not a design spectrum. So this Newmark and all, the division of this time, initially they used 0.33 seconds, up to that is acceleration, 0.33 to 3.3 as a velocity, above 3.3 as a displacement. Further, it has been modified by the Malhotra by 0.62 and all. That is why we can see that our spectrum has this cutoff period, because it was adapted from some old studies. Literally speaking, it is not depends upon some assumed value of the cutoff period. So why we should not assume the cutoff period? You can see that the next generation east GMPs are the data, and the next generation west data, and Indian intraplate Himalayan region data, our code spectrum in the following pictures. So you can see here basically. So here the Indian interplate earthquake, you can see actually the rock where ours was standing and what was given in the code. Similarly, the soil where the real spectrum standing from the recorded data, what is given in the code. So this, the higher level and this part is not well represented in the code. So in order to address that, what we did actually, we carried out a development of design spectrum using the Indian recorded earthquake data. First, we try to establish basically the cutoff period for the acceleration and velocity and the displacement zone. So this is basically the correlation between the SA with the PGA, PGV, PGD, peak ground acceleration, velocity and displacement, where these changes indicate changes in the performance based design of your displacement, acceleration, velocity. So which we have arrived at and found that those values are completely different from the existing value what we are using. So this is actually the T1, T2, T3. So this is actually the unit PGA, unit PGV and UPGD. This is actually a tripartite plot where the design spectrum has to be represented acceleration, velocity and displacement combinations. So with this actually, so we estimated each available earthquake acceleration, velocity, displacement and try to get this curve, tripartite curve, and try to normalize this curve by using the segmented straight line by taking a large amount of the data. This is the Himalayan data. So where we developed a medium spectrum and smoothed that, and from that we got these factors. This is the factor which represents your design spectrum. You can see your design spectrum now. This is actually the design spectrum. The blue one is actually developed by us using the Indian recorded earthquake data. The red one actually given from the code. In fact, the rock condition, our the design spectrum terminate at only 2.3. Okay. So, but in the soil condition, it is different. So, but at the same time, in the longer period, you can see that there is a larger this one, which is important for the consideration of the long period structures. Okay, so this period is completely different from them. That we also define a equation function of that, how you can get a design spectrum. So after defining the design spectrum, we also compared with the universally used rock level spectrum. We found that actually the European spectrums are completely different from our spectrum because of change in the seismotectonic and other regions. And even if you change your PGA values, your design spectrum also changes, as the equation includes the rock level PGA considered for the ground motion. It depends upon the hazard analysis. So with this, so we are ready with the ground motion prediction equation and a design spectrum. So in order to estimate a future stick hazard, one has to consider the maximum magnitude estimation in the region. We come up with the concept of regional rupture character to estimate region-based max, and also the probable location based on the seismic gap and the minor earthquake and activity. So clubbing these two, we come up with the future stick seismic hazard map of India, which is basically this one. Okay, the southern, basically the Indo-Gangetic Basin map we are showing. So Indian level, we are working on that. So with that, we carried out a number of survey velocity measurement up to the 350 to 500 meter depth and try to estimate a velocity with depth, and then give that as input at 1000 meter per second, try to estimate amplification. So this is the sum of the amplification map, which shows the rock level variation, how it amplifies. In some of the places where you can see that the surface acceleration lower than the some depth acceleration due to the complex geological formation in the Indo-Gangetic Basin. So with that, we try to give a spectrum at a different level. For example, surface 15 meter, 32 meter, bedrock, and different soil category. Okay, so which we are working on, arrive the finally the suitable design spectrum at the ground surface based on the regional seismic record, seismotectonic parameters, hazard assessment, and velocity measurement. So with that, we are trying to produce the design spectrum which is more reliable and applicable to Indian region. So which will become soon as our publication. So we can understand that even though the concept of hazard analysis, developing of ground motion and site response and many things are very common in the global, but the data what we give depends upon that your regional representation is achieved. So without incorporating the regional level data, whatever we are doing actually does not give a representative hazard as well as design spectrum. So with that, I conclude my presentation. All this work is possible because of mentors, students, and project staff, and also my funding agencies who have been extensively supporting all our research. So I thank all of them, and I also thank the audience and also the chair and co-chair and then organizing committee. With that, so I will open for question. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Professor Andasaran, for your illustrious talk. Now we will take couple of questions. Well, I urge the participants here also to raise some questions from your end.
So can I go? Professor Anbalgan, very interesting talk, but how far we are away from introducing this into Indian codes?
Actually, the code spectrum, when we are recently digging up origin, it was actually based on the Mexico some record, which was developed before the computational facilities are available during like 60s and 50s. So that time, even the US was using a similar kind of spectrum, but now it is becoming outdated. They are all moved to all the advanced version after 4 or 5 revision, but still we are only revising the code, not the spectrum. So I can say that it is, that is why in the Indian code, it is written that even if you design as per code, you will end up in the damage for the ground motion. It is written in the code actually. I don't know how many of you read that.
Thank you.
It's very nice presentation, Professor Andasaran, and I think it's a need of now to revise our code, because lots of such studies are nowadays are going on to review what are the codal provisions, and I think you have done some wonderful job. You have compared the different kind of the data from the European and the Indian and many of the GMP. You have also studies in this in your this work. My only question is that because now lots of experimental studies are also going on in the Himalayas. Have you taken consider of these kind of the studies in your developing these GMPs or not? Because recently we have done one disaster risk assessment study of whole Uttarakhand, and we have done the trenching of some of the parts of the this Himalayan region. And I think it's when we see the what are the this geotechnical and this geological conditions, these equations can be somehow sometimes change. GMPs can be having some reflections of some PGA, and these can be also having some effect. So have you done these kind of the studies? You are included in this?
Yeah. See, actually, in order to arrive the probable future possible earthquake location, we consider all the seismotectonic excavation, activity related studies, seismic instrumentation on earthquake recordings. So all those things we consider. So, but we are not done the GMP development for the ground surface. We have done only up to the rock, as we have very limited data on the soil recordings. So for developing a different site class. So rock, at least we have some considerable data. So, but we taken into account whatever studies which happened recently. Most of the publication related to the respective region has been accounted in the particular aspects.
Thank you. Thank you. And second question, Professor Anbadagan, because the magnitude scale is also very important. And the many of these magnitudes basically which we are using in this GMP equation, somehow they are saturated. So now have you taken consideration of the homogenization of this magnitude scale in your this work?
Yeah. Actually, since we are not discussing in detail all of this, so if you refer our earthquake hazard assessment paper of the Himalayan region, so we actually consider all the magnitude, homogenized and declustered, and then finally use the MW magnitude for this one. So even the recent studies which they have come up with the new scale for MW generalized one, which says that less than magnitude of 7. Okay, the MW scale is in higher side. More than magnitude of 7, MW scale is lower side. So since we count that our study before publishing this, so we are also working on now related to that kind of aspect for the entire regional Indian study aspect actually. And here I have to also highlight that since you people as a scientist working on seismology, so in India, even though we use some scale to give the earthquake data, but I am very sure that that scale was not applicable to India. For example, soon after earthquake data, they release some scale, no magnitude.
Yes.
Which scale they release? Generally, they say that local magnitude or Richter magnitude, but there is a correction factor need to apply it in the regional level, which was not developed as per my knowledge. So, because I never come across any publication or report on that. We also written to MOES on that. Maybe sufficient data are not available to develop. Maybe future we come up. There are some questions in the chat box, I think.
Yes. Thank you. Yes,
There
Dr.
is some
Dr.
question
Rajiv.
from the chat box. Yeah. Shreyas is asking, how many years of strong motion data has been considered for developing GMP? And the number of
no, actually, as I said that our instrumentation started in only 1950, but the FAT instrumentation is started only after 1995 or 2000. Okay, after Bhuj earthquake, only large number of instrumentation was set up. So we have taken a old data from the Cosmos and all, then also the new data from the BESMOS. So where up to the 2017, our GMP consists of the data. So because the equation was released on 2019, so we consider data up to that. The after data we are now collecting and working on that. But the GMP was developed up to that.
There is another question. How to account for uncertainty while developing GMPs?
So there is a error term in the end of the GMP term, which gives how far your the estimated value realistically fit into the actual value. So that error term will take care of the uncertainty. When you are modeling in the probabilistic approach, that error term is very, very.
I hope you have answered the participant's question. I think there is no more other question.
Now, Rajiv, you proceed to the another presentation. Thank you, Professor.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Professor Anbadagan, for your illustrious talk, and I hope we are all benefited. Thank you so much. Now,
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, so we move on to our paper presenters. So, first paper presenter, paper number 765, nonlinear soil amplification models for a moderately active seismic zone in India by Shreyas VC, GM Foundation.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Shreyas V, and I'm a seismic hazard modeler at GEM Foundation. So the topic that I will be presenting today is actually a part of my PhD dissertation work. So because of the pandemic and everything, it got delayed, and so we're presenting it late now. So the title of the presentation is Nonlinear Soil Amplification Models for a Moderately Active Seismic Zone in India. So this is the outline of my presentation. So first I will be talking about the scope and methodology, and also about the models and the conclusion that I arrived from my study. So as we know that usually a rupture is generated at a certain depth from the surface, and then it gets propagated through the layered media. So depending upon the dynamic characteristics of the layered media, usually you can see that different properties and also amplification and so on and so forth. So in the study, I have used equivalent linear methodology, and it has been performed on Shape 2000 platform. So my study area is the western coastal stretch of Karnataka. So as a one of the objectives of my PhD study, I have attempted to estimate the seismic hazard, the reference site condition. So in my case, the reference site condition was around 760 meter per second, and these are the boreholes, some of the boreholes that we could actually get the information on, and we obtained this information through the consultancy cell of NIT Calicut. So, and if you can see, the topography of the study region has also been highlighted to the right side. So the topography varies from being a hilly terrain towards a coastal plain towards the beaches. So ends. We had taken approximately around 150 boreholes overall in this location, and we tried to perform site response for that. So depending upon the soil data that we collected, overall we could divide all the soil profiles into three major categories. One is sandy, clay, and there were few soil deposits which couldn't be categorized into any particular category. So hence we have kept it as an all soil. So the three soil profiles which I'm showing you here, all of them have their VS30 to be around 330 meter per second. Sorry, here the picture has been cropped here for the sandy deposit. So as per the NIHAR classification, all the sites belong to site category C. And our study region is actually located in seismic zone 3 as per IS 1893 classification. So speaking of processing of geotechnical data, so what we obtained was bore log information, so which consisted of all soil properties and SBTN values. So our first challenge was to estimate the shear wave velocity profile. So in that regard, we have used a couple of correlations which we developed for India and also outside of India, but a similar region or soil characteristics. So these are some of the correlations that we investigated in our study. And as you can see, this HR and also UD, these were like extreme outliers. So these kind of correlations were not considered in the next step. Instead, we took the central portion of our estimate, which was forming like a solid band, as you can see here, and then we have taken an average of all the six. We shortlisted 6 correlations, so I've taken the average of the 6 correlations, and VS profile has been estimated as shown in the red line in this plot. Apart from this, we had taken the standard deviation as well, because we were looking at profile variability and so on. So this is the statistics of the compiled bore logs. Majority of our soil bore profiles belong to shear wave velocity in the range of 350 to 400, and then followed by 300 to 350. So next, coming to the soil modeling part. So I have used the standard model reduction and damping curves developed by Seed and Idris, Seed and Sun, and for rock. And because we were investigating in the coastal region, we used to have a layer called as weathered rock before we actually reach the bedrock. So in such cases, for the weathered rock, I've used the correlation by Gazetas, and I've taken the damping of the soil as 5% and of the weathered rock layer as 2%. And another interesting observation that we made is that in our hazard estimate, the reference site condition was taken as 760 meter per second, but the bottom of our soil profile usually did not terminate at 760. It used to terminate by 300, 350, and so on. So we have used a host to target adjustment because we had to bring the hazard values at a 760 meter per second to 330 or 340, depending upon our VS of the bottom at the bottom of the soil profile. So this is a correlation which was developed by Laurentio et al. 2013 based on the ground motion recordings from Japan. So we have used their correlation, and we generated a host to target adjustment factor, and this factor was actually multiplied with the UHS that was generated. So here, if you see the black line, is actually the UHS what we obtained from the hazard study, and this curve was then multiplied by the HTTA factor, and then the target spectrum was derived. So all the ground motions that were selected and scaled was with respect to the target spectrum. So that was hence it was really necessary for us to match the VS of the bottom of the soil profile and the VS for which the hazard or the spectrum was generated. This slide actually highlights the scope for our study because the first fundamental question is why would we need an amplification model which considers alternative input parameters other than VS30. So here, like I showed you in one of the earlier slides, I had shown three stratigraphic profiles with same VS30. So these are the same three profiles, but categorized into different soils. All of them had their VS30 around 330 meter per second, but still, as you can see here, it behaves differently depending upon the soil type as well. So this was a guiding light, I would say, in suggesting that VS30 alone would not be sufficient in actually characterizing the nonlinear amplification. So hence we decided to go for a nonlinear amplification model, which considers the intensity of the input bedrock motion, that is SARF, as the one of the input parameters. So this was the model that we had proposed during my PhD. So in this, both initially we tried a linear model, but it was not fitting. The curve was not fitting properly, which I'll show in the next slide. Hence, we had to go for a nonlinear model. And then it is finally incorporated into the hazard integral. We modify the GMP, which was used, wherein the site term has been given based on the site-specific studies, and then it is incorporated in the hazard calculation. So this is how the plot looks for nonlinear amplification. So as you can see here, certain soil deposits, such as in case of sand, they show a non-linear behavior, which is why fitting a linear curve is not possible. But on the other hand, at higher periods, if you see, you can see an upward trend, which shows that these two variables are positively correlated. This was mainly because the site period was around 1 second. That is why you can see increased value of amplification in these 3 period ranges. The reason why this amplification characteristics was actually investigated at different spectral periods is to know which spectral period can offer a better estimation. So from this, we decided to go ahead with using the PGA as the standard amplification function, and we did not consider rest of them when we were incorporating it into the hazard integral. So these were some of the coefficients that was developed, and because we did our calculation based on different soil types, we observed a highest amplification of 5 for clay sites and 3.5 for sandy sites. When we compared it with respect to amplification versus rock, so this is based on our amplification function, the one you're seeing it on the left, and also we studied how these different profiles will actually vary when we are talking about the peak ground acceleration along the depth. Then finally, we compared it with the existing spectra. So as Professor Anbalagan highlighted in his talk as well. So we compared it with first is BIS 1893-2016. So as you can see here, this is nowhere close to our site-specific estimates. So all the solid lines are from our site-specific estimates. And because we wanted to know the reference or the benchmark for our case, we decided to compare it with other codes as well, and our estimates were agreeing well with the EC8 as well as with the ASCE 41 recommendations. So in conclusion, I would like to say that overall sandy sites exhibit nonlinear behavior, and also they undergo large amplification for a smaller intensity measure, but it reduces substantially. And we also found out that the cutoff input acceleration value was around 0.1 G, beyond which the sites will demonstrate the nonlinear behavior. So among all 3 different categories that we considered, sandy site was considered to be highly nonlinear material. And an interesting observation that we made in the clay sites was that they play a major role in long period seismic waves because we could see sustained or higher amplification even at longer periods. And overall, the sandy site amplifies 33% more than all soil and 29% more than clay site. And in addition to that, the model what we have developed, it can be used for other different sites and with different input motions as well. So this was just a big initial study that we did, and this was entirely site specific, but the methodology that has been developed through the study is applicable for any other study anywhere else. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Shreyashvi. So we will take a couple of questions. Okay, let me start from my side. Shreyashvi, you have taken equivalent earthquake response model, is
Yeah.
it? Okay. So how have you actually confronted all those nonlinear parameters? Because what I can see, it is a stratified model that is layer after layer, and then you have incorporated all those parameters. But our soil behavior is very much erratic in nature. That is, nonlinear indexes are always there. So how can you actually incorporate all those things?
If I understood your question correctly, you're asking that I use the equivalent linear methodology, but I'm talking about nonlinear behavior.
Yeah.
Actually, yes. So it's a very good question, and we wanted to do the nonlinear analysis, but we needed slightly more information about the soil profiles. But since we did not do the soil investigation, it was very difficult for us to get additional information on these soils. So the best method that we could have gone ahead was with equivalent linear, which can still capture the nonlinear behavior in the soil. And the next thing, what we did as a verification is, as you saw in one of the plots, when I plot amplification versus the input rock spectral acceleration, if it had showed a linear behavior, or if I could fit a linear curve, then obviously we could have said that equivalent linear method is not able to capture the nonlinear behavior. But since we could not fit a linear curve, but we could fit a nonlinear curve effectively, so we decided the equivalent linear method is doing a good job in capturing the nonlinear site response, and then we proceeded further along with that.
Okay, I understand. So I have another one that is in your slide number 12. You have plotted amplification. Yeah, slide number 12, amplification versus that is your time period. I see a lot of gaps. Can you tell me that why these gaps are happening? That is in between some periods I can see. Then when you are plotting.
You mean to say the scatter?
Yeah, data plots. Yeah, they're little bit scattered.
Actually, yes. We could see higher variability at t is equal to 3 seconds. I'm not sure if my screen is visible, or I should share it again. So as you can see here, we were seeing higher dispersion. So at longer periods, our amplification model was probably not effective, I would say, because considering the scatter, irrespective of whichever functional form that we choose, it's very difficult to fit in that case. So depending and this dispersion, what we are saying, it could usually depend upon the kind of input motions that we are giving for the site response as well. So that is why, considering this higher dispersions, we decided to go ahead with just the PGA as an effective input parameter for the amplification model. That was the reason for testing it across different periods. But yes, this higher dispersion is mainly because of the large amount of variability in the input motions that we chose.
Can I have one question, please?
Any other questions?
Yeah, can I have one question?
Yeah, sure.
Very interesting study, Ms. Shreyashvi. So I have one doubt. You have shown one, I think, slide 6, that SPT versus VS.
Yeah.
So this is based on different models here. This VS versus N correlation based on different models. Okay. Okay. And now you are saying that clay, sand, and all soils is what is the how do you classify clay, sand, and all soils? Is clay and sand are not a subset of this all soils, kind of?
Yeah, I mean, if a deposit or a bore log has a predominantly clay content, then or it's predominantly clay soil, then we took it as a clay deposit. And if it was predominantly sandy, then we took it as sandy. But there were few soil deposits which we couldn't distinguish or put it into these two categories. Only for those deposits we have put it as all soil.
Okay, maybe this instead of all soil, rest of the soils would have been appropriate,
Yeah.
isn't it?
Okay.
Okay,
Yeah.
so here you mean sandy clay means based on the fine grain and coarse grain soil classification, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Less than
yeah.
75% passing, retaining on 75
Fines.
microns.
Yeah. Percentage fines. Yeah.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, can I ask a question?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Shreyasi, I just want to ask, when you are modeling your surface wave propagation, have you considered the initial stress by means of atmospheric pressures or creep, or, like we have lots of initial stress that do exist inside the medium.
Yes.
So have you
So
considered parameter corresponding to that?
actually, if you're using Darren Daily model, like I have used seed and Edries, seed and sun. If we are using Darren Daily model, then we have to compute mean confining stress and over consolidation ratio and so on. But for the model, the model reduction curves that I have chosen, it was not necessary for me to calculate the initial stress and so on. So that is why I've not done that.
Okay, all right, thank you.
It basically depends upon the requirement of the model, model's reduction and damping curves model, which you are trying to assign it for your soil profile.
All right, thank you.
Okay, I think there is no more other questions. So thank you, Shreyasi, for your nice presentation and also completing in time. So let us move on to the next panelist. Phase velocity of paper number 867. Phase velocity of lobe type waves in a periodic irregular anisotropic layered substratum by Tapas Ranjan Panigrahi.
Good morning, one and all. First of all, I would like to thank the organizer that they have arranged such a nice platform in this pandemic situation. This is Tapas Ranjan Panigrahi from Department of Mathematics, BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus. This is Tapas Ranjan Panigrahi from Department of Mathematics, BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus, working under the supervision of Dr. Sumit Kumar Vishwakarma. So that my title of presentation is phase velocity of lobe type waves in a periodic irregular anisotropic layer substratum. These are my outlines of the presentations. Basically, I'm working in the field of seismology, which deals with the study of earthquakes. Obviously, it's the earth structure. So if we release some energy near the surface of the earth, then some parts of energy goes on the surface and some parts of energy goes inside the earth. So those part of energy goes on the surface of the earth is called surface wave, and lobe wave comes under the surface wave. It is discovered by A.H. Love, that's why the name is lobe wave. So lobe wave is basically the horizontally polarized surface wave, and you can see here the figure. So here x-axis is taken in the horizontal direction and z-axis in the vertical direction. So when the wave propagates in the direction of x, but the movement of the particle in direction of y only, that means the displacement occurs in the direction of y. There is no displacement occurs in the direction of x and direction of z. Previously, it was assumed that the earth layer is isotropic, but Sierra investigate that the presence of anisotropy in it. Sari and Salk have discussed the lobe wave propagation in a layer medium, and he have taken the density varying as a hyperbolic function. Kerry et al. Investigated the propagation of lobe wave in a fluid saturated porous medium, and Kian et al. They have discovered this lobe wave as a functional graded half space. Bayer in his study have taken the initial stress and studied that initial stress have a great role in this phase in the wave propagation. Chatterjee et al. They discovered that the lobe wave propagation occurs in a fiber reinforced medium. Bullen in his study have showed the density law inside the earth, and he suggested that when the earth lies in between 413 to 987 kilometers, then that moment it behaves quadratically, and beyond that it behaves linearly. So whatever data we have taken here, we have taken from Gubins. So basically, this is the blueprint of my problem. So here, as everyone knows that the earth is consist of different layers. So here we have taken 3-layer model, and 3-layer, and in the boundary we have taken the corrugations. The upper layer is 3 surface, and we have taken the initial stress in the lower one. So as till now no one have taken this type of model. Also we have in the half space, you can see that we have taken the product of a linear and exponential function, and in the upper medium we have taken a Paolo model, and the medium 2 is a isotropic one. So till now no one have taken this type of model. So this is my proposed study. So here the x-axis is taken in the horizontal direction, and z-axis in the towards the center of the earth, which is taken as the positive. So basically what we are doing, actually we are calculating the phase velocity, and we are trying to show the impact of these inhomogeneity parameters on the phase velocity. So for that we need the displacement for the 3 layers individually. So here we have the equation of motion which derived from Biot, and here you can see that only the displacement in terms of V1 only, because log wave is the movement of the log wave, particle movement in the log wave in the direction of Y only. So that's why U1 and W1 here the displacement of x and displacement in direction of Z equal to 0. So for solving this equation 1, we are assuming that the solution will be a harmonic solution, and then we are converting this equation, partial differential equation, to the ordinary differential equation. Then using this inhomogeneity that we have taken in the Pavlov model, so it will convert to a second order homogeneous differential equation. And again, solving this differential equation, we will get the displacement V1, and which is the displacement for the upper medium. In the middle layer, that which is a isotropic medium, and in this medium we just simply the N and L are the directional rigidity, and we simply substitute this with mu2, and again we solving this for the medium 2, we'll get this differential equation 9, and sorry, this inhomogeneity, this displacement V2, which is the displacement for the medium 2. For the half stress, we have taken here the again we are taking from the Biot's equation of motion, and again the same condition applied because this is the log wave. That's why it's only we have displacement only in the y direction only. So here we have the initial stress P is present, and here the tau ij are the stresses, and we are using the stress-strain relationship in this, and also using this inhomogeneity conditions. Then the differential equation will convert to equation number 11, and using the solving this equation, we assume the harmonic solution in terms of V3, and again doing some calculations, we'll get this differential equation, this differential equation V3. So here you can see that we have a presence of a hypergeometry and log real function. But as you know that the half space is tending to towards infinity, that means towards the central core. So while we are reaching at the central core, that moment the displacement will be tends to 0. So here we are applying this condition in this V3, and it will reduces to only hypergeometric function. There is log real function will be goes to 0. So here we have 3 displacements and 5 unknowns. So for solving this displacements, we need the 5 boundary conditions. As our in the geometry, the upper surface is 3 surface. So that moment the normal stress will be 0. So here the first condition, the normal stress will be 0. In the interface of the first and second layer, the stresses will be equal, as well as the displacement also equal. Likewise, in the second and third interface, the displacement will be equal, as well as the stresses will be equal. So right now we have 3 displacements and 5 equations. We are substituting these 3 displacements in these 5 boundary conditions, and we will get 5 subsequent equations, and in which 5 unknowns will be present. So for a non-trivial solution, the determinant should be 0. So this is called nothing but the dispersion equation. But here you can see that we have taken only the real part, because we are dealing with the phase velocity. So that's why we have taken the real part of this. So all the elements are defined below. So again, coming to the particular case. So in our particular case, you can see that we have divided this problem in 2 tables, table 1 and table 2, and we have considered 6 cases. So in table 1, we have taken that because the corrugation is present, so we divided the let's in the table 1 we have the 1 corrugation only present, and in table 2 only 2 corrugation present, and other interfaces will be flat. So that moment, how I'm a mathematics student, so it's very difficult for us to show the impact of this phase velocity in mathematical form. So that's why we need for better visualization, we need some graphical representation. So I took the help of Mathematica to solve this problem and plotting this graph. So here I have plotted 6 figures. So first 4 figures plotted for this case 1 to case 3, and next 2 figures for the case 5 and case 6, 5, 6 and 7. So here you can see that here in the x-axis we have taken the wave number, and in the y-axis we have taken the phase velocity. So if you see the considering this figure 2, then we'll see that the D1 is the amplitude. While increasing the amplitude, you can see that the phase velocity simply decreases. But in case of figure 3, figure 4, figure 5, which is plotted for alpha, A and B, the phase velocity increases. Here you can say that the amplitude has a significant role in the phase velocity. In case of alpha, which is associated with medium 1, you can see that while increasing these values of alpha, then that moment you can see the phase velocity increases. And here you can see that in case of case 3, it is more significant than the case of case 2 and case 1. If you see that figure 4 and figure 5, which is associated for the half space, then that moment you will find the figure 5 is simply more significant than the figure 4. And here in figure 4, the phase velocity also increases. In case figure 5 also is increases. In figure 6 and figure 7, we have plotted for the 2 corrugated interface at a time. So in that moment, you can see that in the figure 6, we have plotted increasing the values of D1, while in figure 7, we have increasing the values of D2. So here in this case, you can see that for figure 6, the phase velocity increases, while in figure 7, the phase velocity decreases. So you can say that the corrugation or the corrugated interface have a greater impact on this phase velocity. Sometimes it increases and sometimes it decreases this phase velocity. So overall, what we see, we actually the corrugation have a greater impact on this phase velocity, as well as the inhomogeneity parameters what we have taken in the upper layer and lower half space also have a great significance on the phase velocity. So this study may help the seismologist in oil exploring, maybe in signal processing, or you can say that this may be helpful in the destruction, to stop the destruction caused by the earthquakes. So these are my references. And thank you.
Thank you, Tapash, for completing in time. Okay, now we move on to some question and answer sessions. Well, then let me start from myself. Tapash, as you were saying regarding about the inhomogeneity parameter, so what have you taken into consideration in that inhomogeneity parameter?
Sir, actually, Bullen have described the density that he suggested in 1940 that in between the distance between in the Earth, when it is 430 to 987 kilometers, it acts as quadratically, and beyond that is linearly. And extending this work, so many scientists they have working upon that, and they have taken this different type of inhomogeneity like parabolic, hyperbolic, like trigonometric exponential functions, but no one till now have taken this product of one exponential and one linear functions. So that's why I have taken this one in my model.
Because if we look into some kind of physical variables, that is density, compactness, so many things may come into picture.
Yes, sir.
So I am just wondering whether those things are directly correlated into your inhomogeneity index or not.
Sorry, sir.
Look, in case of your physical variables, when you talk about this soil amplification, this slope velocity, because density is one of the most important parameters. You also know. And when you are considering it is an isotropic medium, because as I can see, it is a periodic isotropic medium. And all of we know that when I use the word isotropy, that it means the properties are remaining the same. Yeah, irrespective of the direction. But in the real case, this is totally different.
Okay, sir.
So how can you actually confront all those issues here?
We are proposing a theoretical study only. Actually, my background is mathematics. I am from mathematics, so we are just proposing a theoretical study. So we don't have that much practical knowledge regarding these things.
Now, I would suggest you that at least you also include some experimental investigations. So thereby it will become a very good big contribution from your side. Okay, so is there anyone? Any other questions, please? Okay, thank you, Tapash. I can see no more further questions. Good luck for your PhD period. Thank you. And now let's move on to the next panelist. Simulated in paper number 741. Sorry.
He is not there. 741 is not there.
I'm extremely sorry. So let's move on to the next one, 782, Synthetic Ground Motion Simulation for Varanasi City by Manjari Singh, MN National Institute of Technology, Allahabad.
Good morning all. I'm Manjari Singh and I'm a research scholar from MNIT Allahabad. And today I'm going to present my presentation on topic of synthetic ground motion simulation for Varanasi City. Here's the outline. As we all know that the earthquake is one of the most hazardous and destructive events in terms of human losses and structural damages, which is increases with the seismicity and the population. So the earthquake resistant structure, for the design of the earthquake resistant structures, the earthquake hazard assessment is very important. So, and for the characteristics of the ground motion that are very important to the engineering community are amplitude, frequency, and duration. So the simulation of the earthquake ground motion time histories are conducted using the stochastic techniques, and the simulation is presented in terms of acceleration, velocity, displacement, and time history. So basically, I have chosen my study area is Varanasi City, which lies in the Indo-Gangetic plain and which is very close to the seismically active Himalayan belt and which is vulnerable to the great earthquakes in Himalayan belt. And Varanasi City is one of the oldest city and which is thickly populated and clustered with narrow lanes and old buildings, and it is not well planned and structured. So it is very important so even a smaller earthquake can cause a considerable loss. So in this regard, stochastic approach has been adopted for the synthesis of the ground motion, and for this an EXIM methodology which is given by the Burek and has been used for the synthesis of the ground motion considering the various faults around the city. Before going into the deep of this presentation, let's have a look about the city. The city lies in a eastern part of the Uttar Pradesh, and it is also well known for the city of Ghaj. It's a very religious city, and it's a very heavily populated. We can see that as per the census 2011, it is the most populous city, and the city is situated on the river bank of the river Ganga, and it is surrounded by the two small rivers Varuna on the north and Asi in the south, and it is well connected with the different national highways and the state highways. This is the seismic background, or for the Varanasi city. We can see that this is the map of Uttar Pradesh, and I have plotted various faults and ridges are there, and these dots are showing the earthquakes. These are the magnitude that is reported during in the Uttar Pradesh. That is from magnitude. The highest magnitude is 8 and the lowest is 3.6. These are the various faults which is found around the city, and like Allahabad fault, Azamgarh fault, Devariya, Gorakhpur fault, Lucknow fault, Siwan, and Shahjahanpur fault. And these are the various characteristics like length, type, latitude, longitude, strike depth, and the maximum magnitude is calculated as per the Wilson-Coppersmith equation. So in this study, a seismological model from the Motazarian and the Atkinson has been used for the simulation of the ground motion. The ground motion simulation in this procedure, fault is divided into the n number of subfaults, and each fault is symbolized as a point source. So this is a Fourier amplitude spectrum for the ground motion, which is used in this study. And this is the dynamic corner frequency for the seismic moment m0 and stress drop del sigma. And since the recorded ground motion data is unavailable for the city and has been simulated due to all the faults which is around which is within the 450 kilometers and for different stress drops. So EXIM methodology, that is the extended finite fault simulation, which is based on the finite fault approach to simulate the ground motion database for the Varanasi city. So in this method, various parameters I have considered, like shear wave velocity, stress drop, various stress drop I have considered, and the quality factor, geometric attenuation, kappa factor, and the reference stress drop. This is the one of the fault simulation that is for the Azamgarh fault. I have simulated for various stress drop, and we can see in a tabulated version that the simulated peak ground acceleration for various faults, we can see that the maximum value is obtained at 200 bar pressure, that is 0.783 G. So the following methodology have been validated with the recorded Nepal earthquake 2015, and various ground motions are recorded that is taken by the Strong Ground Motion Center, and I have just simulated the Nepal earthquake, and I have found that the estimated PGA value is 0.248 G, and which is very close to the recorded KTP station, that is 0.26 G. So now now coming to the conclusion, the Varanasi city lies in the Indo-Gangetic basin with numerous fault lie in the surroundings, and all the seismic sources have potential that may generate the large earthquake in future. Since any ground motion data is not available for the city, so the ground motion simulation for the all shear faults using the stochastic finite fault method for the different stress drop is considered, and maximum PG is adopted estimated for Azamgarh fault, and these studies very helpful in site response study, further study for the site responses for Varanasi city. Yeah, here are the references.
Now we can take a couple of questions here.
Okay.
So Manjari, in the beginning of your presentation, in one of the slides you have given, that is, you have enlisted so many faults, and there is a column I can see you have written there, all fault type all. So what do you exactly mean by that? So are not you taking, that is all your faults are inclusive of strike slip, normal, then thrust?
So basically, I have considered these faults, and these are the no, sir. I have considered all the things that the quality like strike. Okay.
Maybe in your slide number 3 or that I can see a table. In the table, it's written fault type all.
Sir, I have taken all the things like strike depth and all the characteristics.
No, I am talking about the type of the fault. So whatever you have actually shown here about this, ground motion, then this stress drop, that is along with this increasing stress drop, you are showing your calculated values. So I just wonder, so these are they related to only one specific fault, or they're related to different faults? Because different faults will generate different kind of.
Yeah, sir, I have considered for the specific faults like normal faults.
So which type of fault you are actually considering here?
So for the normal faults.
All normal faults.
Yeah.
So how many accelerograms have you taken into consideration?
Sir, I have generated for all the faults. Like, sir, I have shown the table for Azamgarh fault, for the Allahabad fault. I have done the simulation for each fault, and I have estimated that the Azamgarh fault gives the maximum value. So I have shown it only that fault.
No, I am asking about that. How many strong motion records have you taken into account?
Sir, the strong down motion, sir, there is no strong down motion available for that city. So I have only simulated.
Manjari?
Yes, sir.
Are you listening me? I think Rajiv, you have very valid questions you are asking, and my question is basically you are talking about the simulation.
Yes,
so how you have done this simulation, because I have not found in your presentation any kind of this simulation methodology, because simulation can be done in various way. So now you have calculated, because these are the somehow very we can say the inactive region of earthquake. Like if you saying different faults are there, but they are the past history of these faults are very minimum. So how you have correlate your study basically, if I am doing any study, like I am working with some live projects here, and if any of the studies having any practical, having no significant practical implication, so I think this cannot be very much appreciated. So my only thing is how you have done this this simulation, and what Dr. Rajiv is also asking very good question about the how the different kind of the this spectral acceleration and this response spectra, these kind you have validated or not?
Sir, actually, basically, I have taken those fault from the literature that which is responsible for the future earthquake, like like Azamgarh fault and the Allahabad fault. These are also used in various publications. So I have just chosen those faults which is responsible for the future earthquake. So,
Rajiv, you can take one question by the Professor Daya Shankar. I think he was asking.
Okay. So, anyways, Manjari, the thing is that when you are going for the simulation and when it is validated by your observed thing, then the study becomes much more clearer. This is my suggestion, but you also think upon that. So there are some questions coming from the question and answer session. So Professor Daya Shankar, he has asked the question, what was the minimum magnitude recorded at near Varanasi city?
Sir, it is around 3.6. I have shown, sir, it is around 3.6.
3.6.
Yeah.
So you can also type your answer, or you can also answer live.
Okay, sir, I'll type my answer there.
Any more questions from the panelists here? Okay, how Manjari, you have given the answer. Okay, so we can see any more questions. Anyway, thank you, Manjari, for your presentation. So let us move to the next panelist. Paper number 829, law wave dispersion in an inhomogeneous earth's crust lying over a pre-stressed inhomogeneous mantle by Sumit Kumar Vishwakarma, BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus, India. Yeah, Giriji, but he is not available here.
Okay.
So that's why I moved to the last one. Anyway, if he comes in between, then we can take him.
Yeah, good morning, everyone. I'm Dr. Sumit Kumar Vishwakarma, Assistant Professor in the Department of Mathematics, BITS Pilani, Hyderabad campus. And I'm going to present my paper on a mathematical study of love wave frequency in an Earth's substratum lying over a pre-stressed mantle. So basically, we want to show that what is the behavior of love wave when it propagates through a layer, which of course have lots of inhomogeneity content in it, and that lies on a half space. So as we know that this love wave is not a complete love wave, but we are mimicking it using the fact that there is a horizontal shifting of the medium when it propagates through the Earth's substratum. So the contents are the geometry and formulation of the problem, and then we'll look at the solutions of the displacement in the layer and the displacement in the half space. And we'll combine both this displacement via necessary boundary conditions to deduce the dispersion equation in a closed form using a suitable mathematical approach. And then we'll look at the particular case that if this validates the present finding and relates it with the one which is already found by the other authors. And then we'll discuss about the graphs and the conclusion. So if we look at the behavior of love wave, this is not new for the mathematicians and the seismologists to work on the love wave propagation. But basically our focus here is to know that how love wave actually behaves when it passes through a medium which has lots of inhomogeneity content or associated by means of the rigidity, density, initial stress. So I'll take you directly to the model that we have here. We have considered a layer, and the layer is lying over a pre-stressed half space. So the initial stress P you can see. This initial stress can be considered to be positive and negative. Accordingly, it is a compressive or a tensile. And then we are considering here that the upper layer is inhomogeneous anisotropic in nature. So this N and L, they are the directional rigidity along the X direction and along the Z direction. So one is the horizontal, other is a vertical directions rigidity. And rho is the density. So we can see that all these varies exponentially, that alpha is an inhomogeneity parameter to the power 1 plus mz, where m is also an inhomogeneity associated with it. Now, what is the motivation behind considering this inhomogeneity is that we have taken or we have undergone the study done by Bullen in 1940, and he has deduced a particular calculation which claims that the density and rigidity of the medium can vary exponentially, linearly, or can follow other mathematical transcendental functions. So this would not be very unrealistic to study various mathematical functions associated with this rigidity and density. And then we can see that if the numerical value of this alpha and m varies, then how would the velocity changes? Similarly, we are keeping this half space with is inhomogeneous isotropic medium. Knowing the fact that isotropic is highly virtual, we are just proposing this study that this isotropic medium inhomogeneous in nature is that the rigidity is nowhere into the horizontal and the vertical direction, and we have a rigidity mu that is which exists thoroughly according to this mathematical function of mu to b to the power az into e to the power bz, and rho and p, rho is a density and p is the initial stress. So the thing is that if we look at the various study done by this Chapman, Bullen, we have Sahu et al. And the team. So they have already taken lots of mathematical functions which are not a combinations of you can see here we are taking a composite of the function in terms of the multiplications, but most of the study that has been done have taken either exponential, linearly, or quadratic. But here basically we wanted to know that if these inhomogeneities are associated by means of this exponential functions, then how would the behavior turn up for this love wave propagation? So this is the geometry of the problem, and we are keeping the free boundary plane in the in the upper plane. You can see that there's a free boundary, and basically this interface is very interesting because the boundary conditions would be taken up at the interface by means of the equality of the displacement and the equality of the shear stresses. So we will start with the condition that there is a horizontal shifting. So the shifting is only in the direction of the y-axis, because you can see here x is a horizontal direction and z is a vertical direction and y is towards us from the plane of the paper. So u is 0, w is 0. These are the displacements along the x and z direction. So we have only displacement along the y direction, which is a function of x, z, and t. Of course, t is a time here. And looking at the equation of motion that is being derived by Biot in 1940, we are taking this equation of motion directly, where n and l, they are the directional rigidity, and there is only one motion which is towards the y direction. So the other two displacements are 0. Now we are now in order to solve this partial differential equation, we are taking the help of separation of variables. And separation of variables, you can see V1 has been now separated into a function of z and a function of x and t. And we are taking x minus ct here basically because we have taken the solutions from the D'Alembert solution directly. And this x minus ct is a function that takes the waves towards the positive directions. And the directional rigidity and density of the function has been taken as what we have considered in the geometry. When we are putting it into equation number 1, this is now changing into an ordinary differential equation. And this ordinary differential equations can have a solution analytically as given by equation number 3. And of course, this v of z, we will put it back in the equation number 2 in this equation of small v1. So collectively, we have the term here e to the power ik x minus ct altogether. Now, this is the displacement of the layer. Similarly, we'll go for the displacement of the half space, where we have the equation of motion given by, again, from the theory of Biot in 1940. And this sigma xy, sigma yy, sigma yz, these are the shear stresses. These are the normal stresses, sigma yy. P is the initial stress, which is again a function of a mathematical function of z, the depth. And of course, the strain and strain relationship shows that sigma xy is equal to mu times of del v2 by del x, and sigma yz is mu times of del v2 by del z. When we'll put it back to the previous equation, and putting this mu, rho, and p as the mathematical function that we have considered here, we are landing with equation number 6. And equation number 6 being a partial differential equation, again we'll be using separation of variable method to solve this equation analytically. And as soon as we are putting this separation of variable form of v2, this equation number 6 gets changed into equation number 7, which is a perfectly an ordinary differential equation. And the solution of that can be taken directly from Mathematica. So you can see that equation number 8 is the displacement in the half space. Now the question is, we have certain intrinsic boundary conditions, and these boundary conditions are given here. Since the upper boundary plane is a free surface, so the shear stress, of course, will vanish out. So the shear stress sigma yz is 0 when z is minus h, because we are taking the positive z axis towards the downward direction. So the negative is towards the upside. So z is minus h, where h is the thickness of the layer we have taken. And at the interface, when the two types of mediums are meeting at z is equal to 0, where the origin lies, we have the equality of shear stresses here. So shear stress of the medium 1 is equal to the shear stress of the medium 2 along, this is sigma yz. And of course, at the interface, again, we have the displacement being equal. So we are imposing this 3 boundary conditions, that of the displacements as we have there. So we have equation number 9, equation number 10, and equation number 11. So if we will combine all these equation number 9, 10, and 11, you can see that we have 3 simultaneous equations which have a variable C1, C2, and C3. So in order to get a non-zero solution of the C1, C2, C3, of course, the determinant, the real part of the determinant would be equal to 0, because we are finding the phase velocity. We are not focusing on the damping velocity. In case if we need to find the damping, we will be taking into consideration the imaginary part of that. So we are taking the real part and we are focusing on the phase velocity. And these are the terms of A11, A12, A13. This is about this terms of the determinant. Now, if we look at the particular cases, so this determinant itself, this real part of Aij, this determinant equal to 0, this is the dispersion equation what we were looking for, and this combines the phase velocity, the inhomogeneity parameters A, M, B, and P as well. So various inhomogeneities are already involved by means of these terms, as you can see here, A11, A12, A21, and so on. And we'll be focusing, we'll be giving the numerical values to those parameters, and we'll look at that how the velocity is actually fluctuating. To be precise, we are just taking a particular case by taking layer when z is 0 and mu is just mu2 and rho is rho2. There is no further inhomogeneity associated with the medium. Then the equation, the dispersion equation that we have derived has now reduced to a very recognizable result, which is given by Love 1911. And this is the dispersion equation of Love wave in a superficial layer over a half space. So this also validates the fact that our findings, what we have done, is correct to some extent. Now let us look at the numerical calculation. So on giving the numerical value to this alpha, we have made it dimensionless actually by dividing it with k and multiplying with k. So alpha by k is the inhomogeneity parameter associated with the layer of the geometry. And when we are taking its value to be 1, 2, 3, 4, when it is increasing, we can see that the behavior is a little bit abnormal here. First, it is decreasing because 1 and then 2, and then it starts increasing. This can be due to the fact that this particular transcendental function creates a nature that gives rise to a little decrement, and then there is an increment in the phase velocity. K is a wave number and h is a thickness, so we have not dimensionalized it to create this x-axis. So kh versus this velocity has been studied here. And the same kind of behavior has been shown here when the inhomogeneity B, which is associated with the layer, And when we are increasing the value, the phase velocity is actually decreasing. And we can also see that when the wave number becomes very high, when it is asymptotically getting closer and closer, we can see that the curves are actually tending to meet. If we will extrapolate it further, we'll see that the curves are meeting. So if the curves are going to meet further for the values around 10 or 15, we can say that we have a critical point where although the values of b by k changes, but the velocity remains same over there. So that critical point is also important for us. And the existence of the critical points can be visible if we'll extrapolate it. So yeah. And the same kind of behavior has been shown with the inhomogeneity parameters which are associated with the half space. When we are increasing, this is also increasing, the velocity is also increasing at a particular wave number. So we're taking the particular wave number, say 2.5, the velocity is actually increasing. And this also governs the fact that this a by k, which was actually associated with e to the power ak and beta to the power ak. So when the exponential, when the exponentiation of the inhomogeneity increases, the velocity is also increasing remarkably. If we look at the inhomogeneity parameter beta, we can say that beta doesn't make much impact on the velocity, as the mere increment in the numerical value of beta, the velocity is not fluctuating much. So this is producing a less impact. Rather, a by k and b by k, they are producing more impact on the velocity of the love wave. The similar thing has been found with this mk. When this value is increasing, the phase velocity is also increasing. You can see that there, if we look at for the lower wave number, the difference between the curves are quite periodic, but when we are going for a higher wave number, this difference is increasing. Thereby, the difference between the velocity is also quite less. So this is something like this is going on and on. It will keep on increasing this kh, the numerical value, and ultimately it is giving rise to a critical points where although the values are changing, but velocity remains same. But here the behavior in figure number 7 is quite abnormal. But this is also interesting with the fact that Chi is actually the initial stress, the non-dimensional form of the initial stress. P by A by K into B, we have kept in the non-dimensional form. And when this initial stress increases, we can see that this phase velocity is actually decreasing, but this is quite asymptotic to the value which is approaching towards the infinity in the wave number. So this behavior is quite abnormal. This may be due to the fact that we have kept the upper boundary plane to be free, and the transcendental function like exponential function and the multiplication of that is creating a spatial impact on the initial stress. So coming to the conclusion. So as in conclusion, we have studied love wave propagation in a non-homogeneous anisotropic crystal layer over a non-homogeneous isotropic half space, and using a suitable analytic approach, closed form of the dispersion equation has been found by means of suitable boundary conditions. And we have found that the exponential function of depth have a great bearing on the phase velocity of love wave, and the non-dimensional parameters such as a by k, b by k, alpha by k, beta by k, m by k, and xi have been found to have a great bearing on the magnitude of phase velocity. And some of these parameters are actually creating an abnormal behavior, creating a very rapid increment in the velocity of the love type waves. And sometimes the velocity is also decreasing remarkably when we are increasing the wave number. This unusual behavior has also been found, which ended up in recognizing possible critical points. And the theoretical studies of seismic waves are helpful in forecasting geophysical parameters during signal processing and seismic data analysis. And this study can be helpful to estimate the damage due to earthquake as well as an application pertaining to geophysical prospecting. Knowing the fact that we don't know, do we have a particular medium that exists in the earth which has exactly same kind of inhomogeneity content? The answer of this could be said no, we don't recognize such medium, but yes, all type of possible studies has been made in the past if we look at the literature survey. And so this is a proposed study when in case if we met by chance where this medium exhibits such kind of exponential variation along the depth, this study can be helpful to forecast various geophysical parameters and seismic data analysis. Thank you.
Thank you, Sumit, for your presentation.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
Yeah, so let's move on to the question answer session.
Mhm.
Well, Dr. Sumit, I think that is your model is based upon that Boolean et al. Am I correct?
Yes. Yeah.
Then you have also taken reference from the Bigot. There is maybe okay. So when you take that, as I can see from your initial slides, it is basically a half space model because you have one layer, then followed by then another one.
Right.
So when you go for the initial values of stress, so how much you are actually presuming to be there?
Sir, we are always keeping the parameters like initial stress non-dimensionalized form. So we don't have a unit for it. We are just keeping the initial stress to be any numerical values taken from Eckenbeck. We have taken the numerical value from the Eckenbeck, and we are not claiming it to be to contain any kind of unit. So generally, we are taking 10 to the power 3 or 10 to the power 4, and by guessing some values in the power of 10, we want to we are actually plotting the curve to know if there is a further deviation in the velocity. So we have not matched it with the observatory datas, the observational datas. We have not matched it. We are just making it dimensionless, and then we are putting some values on it to know how this parameter impacts the velocity. That's all.
Because you also know that when you talk about the log wave, in log waves, there is particle motion is a little bit critical. If you compare the P wave and that S wave also.
Mm-hmm.
So because this log wave, you know, that they are considered a damaging wave, that retrograde and prograde motion is also there. So when you were talking about this phase velocity, because when we look for the, you know, observed seismograms, so there is always a possibility that log wave gets, counterfeited by these, there is our other surface waves, that is Rayleigh waves. So point is that when you talk about these phase velocities, sometimes the kind of ambiguousness always occurs. So I just want to know from your point of view that while you are taking that wave number, because you are taking all of them in the dimensionless view, and you are plotting those values.
Correct.
So how have you accounted for that wave number? That K parameter, I can see it is there.
Yeah. So sir, K, the wave number, the unit of the wave number is the inverse of the length, right?
Okay.
So alone we are not studying K. Whenever we are studying, we are putting every parameter to be dimensionless. That's the reason I multiplied K with H, which is a thickness of the layer. So now in the study, I have kept my x-axis to be KH. Now, during the interpretation, either the K can be taken or the H can be taken. So I'm studying in a combined form, K into H, KH. So that I can only study the impact of these parameters or the extent of the dependencies of these parameters on the velocity of the wave. You can also see that the velocity I have taken is actually C by C naught. So C is the velocity of the love type wave and C naught is the velocity of the shear waves in the medium. So basically I have divided it C by C naught and squared it so that negative thing can be neglected. I have squared it in case C. So basically, this is just a mathematical study of the extent of the dependency of the parameters on the velocities. Now, the thing is that we are working further on it and we are consulting with the scientists here in the National Geophysical Research Institute, NGRI Hyderabad. And we have started working that how can we fit our mathematical model with the model which is governed by the observational data. And to work further on the error analysis as well. How can we reduce the error as well? Sir, we are working on it actually.
Okay,
so you can see that few of the things in our study is little bit virtual. You can say that this is a complete theoretical study. We have not relate our study with the observational study. We are just proposing, in case we have such model do exist in the earth, such medium do exist in the earth, having such and such variations, which is based on the transcendental mathematical functions, then how would this mathematical terms would alter the velocity of the wave? That's all.
Yeah, so when you will be combining this observed thing, then I think this could be a nice contribution.
Yes, yes.
So
absolutely.
let us move to the question answer session more in the chat box. Yeah, Professor Dayashankar, he has asked how phase velocity is related to damage caused by earthquake. Do you want to give the answer live or type answer? I
No,
think
no,
you
I'll
can
just
give the answer live.
Yeah, answer live, and let me just. Yeah, so actually phase velocity is a horizontal shifting of the surface. So this being a surface wave, this is not a body wave. So when we have a shear wave, when shear wave actually comes into existence in the mantle part, a part of the energy propagates onto the surface of the earth, and that got trapped over there. The reflection and refraction got trapped over the upper surface, and that causes love wave to come into existence. And love wave being horizontal shifting of the surface, the earth surface, the earth crust actually starts shifting horizontally. That actually creates a vibration on the upper crustal layer, which leads to the various damage caused by the earthquake. Such kind of behavior can also be shown by the Rayleigh wave. If you can see the Rayleigh wave, it's a combination of the horizontal shifting and the vertical shifting, so resulting in an elliptical motion of the upper surface, upper crustal layer. So Rayleigh wave is also equally responsible for the damage we have caused during the earthquake. Similarly, we have a torsional wave that gives a twist to the medium. So torsional wave is again a surface wave which gives a twist to the medium when it propagates, and its amplitude decays exponentially. So the collapse of the bridges is actually due to the torsion wave, because the twisting takes place in the bridges and it collapses. So these are the surface waves which produce directly the shifting of the upper crustal layer and causes damage during the earthquake.
Can I have one question, please?
Yes.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So I think very interesting, but of course, which I could not follow totally, being a geotechnical engineer anyway. But I have just curiosity with respect to your figure 1, that the H, no, what is the magnitude of that H height?
Figure 1 of the graph.
Yeah, your figure 1.
Let me just figure 1. Okay,
yeah.
Sir.
What is the likely magnitude of that H height?
Sir, again this H, we are keeping H to be hidden. Whenever we are mentioning H, we are writing H in the form of the dimensionless. We are not keeping H alone at a place, so that further question may arise whether you are taking H to be 1 kilometer, 2 kilometers,
yes.
how much the thickness are. So cleverly we are always mentioning H along with the K, so that the entire quantity becomes dimensionless. We should not get dependent on the unit that how much we are taking.
Okay, because no, see, you and your student both were mentioning that it is fully saturated, I think. Your student at least mentioned, you didn't mention, but so the moment you say fully saturated, no, as a geotechnical engineer, I think there are several variations in density and other parameters. So in that line, I was thinking, if you can just mention some H, then I can try to correlate what is happening. Okay, because your pressure P also related to that, right? P also related to gamma H times of that. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thanks a lot. Any other questions?
Any more questions?
Okay.
Okay, Dr. Sumit, I don't think there is any further question. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, sir. Thank you.
You can give some concluding remarks and close the session.
Rajiv, I have made.
I think there was one question there was raised, but I think we are not answered. There was one question they are asking that do you have any, or we are looking at intensity measures apart from spectral accelerations such as your duration characteristics.
Yeah.
From Atul, I think. Yeah, so we are actually, there is one more student working on developing the intensity based predictive equation, since we have large amount of the intensity data. And also we are linking that intensity and duration prediction also, so that future we can estimate a liquefaction landslide, which is a function of duration. We are working on that, but right now we don't have any publication to project that. Yeah, thank you. Sorry.
Rajiv, can I conclude it, or because I have made some small points about different.
Yeah, sure, sure. But just before that, let me ask Dr. Rao. So I don't think that there is any further participant here.
No.
Okay. Thank you so much for this confirmation. Yeah, Giriji, you please proceed.
Thank you all of panelists, and special thank to our keynote speaker, Professor P.N. Bajagan. And today's this is a mixed type of the session, I think. And first of all, the presentation given by the P.N. Bajagan regarding the region-specific consideration for the GMP's development and selection for representative seismic hazard estimate. This is a wonderful presentation, and I think this will be lead to be some of the good recommendation to the codal provision changes in the near future. And I think we need such kind of the studies in India so that we can make some changes, and our code can be revised as per the norms of the which had the highest standard as the European code or the ASC or the any Japanese code. Another panelist, there are two presentation are the mathematics, basically pure mathematics kind of the thing. And I think one is by the Tapan and another is just finished by the Sumit. So because I know the mathematics is the base of any science and engineering, but how we could better relate to the our physical or the practical problem, this could be the more beneficial. So I requested the if any such kind of the mathematicians can be work, they cannot do this work in the isolation, because they can work with the geotechnical scientists or the this geophysics and these people, so that like if you are talking about the love wave and the relay wave, because these are the most destructive wave. If we know little more about these kind of the waves, then we can reduce the lots of destructions while we are making certain kind of the structure. We can have a certain strategy to reduce our losses. So I think this is a good presentation, but mathematics can also be in collaboration with the other engineering aspect also. It regarded to be studied simultaneously. One presentation is by the totally on the geotechnical. This is the non-linear soil amplification model. This is the Shreshwi has given the good presentation. I think this is she has done some good work, and I think the model she has developed for the soil amplification, this can be the need of the nowadays in the different cities. Basically, if we are doing the microzonation studies or the city specific kind of the thing, so these kind of the studies can be very helpful, and this should be transmitted to the government level also, and for the main the structures which we are going to be built in our region. So this is a good study, I think. And another presentation is on the seismic hazard by the Manjari. So I advise to the Manjari that she can also look after the some other different aspect of these simulation studies. So we cannot only do the mathematics and say that this is the final solution. We can correlate it also. If we are not correlating it, then these studies can having certain limitations. So this is my observation about her presentation. So two presentations were not presented, so maybe there is some reason. So I think otherwise this is a good session, and I hope that everybody has enjoyed. And I thank to the Dr. Raghuveer also that he has given his good insight and also support to organize this presentation. I also thankful to Dr. Rajiv Biswas, and he is a good geotechnical scientist, I know that, and he has his deliberation is very nice in this session. So thank you. Now over to you, Rajiv, and then to Raghuveer.
Thank you, Dr. Joshi, for giving such a wonderful remarks, concluding remarks. And I'm also thankful to all the presenters, our keynote speaker, then our organizer, Dr. Raghuveer Rao also. So it was really a wonderful session. I think all of us actually are benefited from this, and there were some really good talks. And I hope and we have come to the conclusion of this session. Now I am simply making this over to Dr. Rao. So you can simply take over it.
Yeah. Thank you, Dr. Rajiv and Dr. Joshi. So let me first of all thank all the speakers of this session. Thank you very much. And on behalf of our organizing committee, I thank both the chair and co-chair for effectively managing the session and finishing it just on time. Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.